And I've been tremendously impressed with the kindness and the hospitality, because my husband and I have been here for a week visiting the country before coming to the conference. I've lived in Hong Kong since 1967, and for many years was involved with clinical medicine. I'm a physician, but I came to feel that in fact it was a little bit like Band-Aid, that health would never improve in the corridors of hospitals and clinics, because we were treating an end-stage system, that some of us had got to go a bit higher up the river and stop the people falling in, rather than providing the ambulance service. It was often too late and unsuccessful. So I made a major career change in 1984 into public health and prevention, and have worked in tobacco control ever since then. I've been very privileged to be involved with the project that the Cancer Centre has produced, and in fact which we will be reviewing tomorrow at great length. And my first comment on it was that I had almost no comments. I think it's the most excellent document. I think probably the best thing I can add is the experience of other countries as to how, for example, they have coped with negative public opinion, how they have introduced smoke-free areas, what are the arguments to present in terms of raising taxes. These are issues that on the surface could look quite unpopular, but in fact when people understand that you raise taxes to prevent children smoking, when you create smoke-free areas to protect the health of the workers, not just the people going in and out of the restaurants for a minute or two, but to protect the health of the people working there for 8 hours, many of these issues become much more acceptable and to the population. So I think that would probably be my main contribution. I would also say, before I begin my talk, that it actually can be done. The year that I was born in the UK, 81% of men smoked. It's now down to 25. Even in Asia, if you look at countries who in the last 30 years have halved their male smoking rates, Japan from 80% to 40%, Singapore and Hong Kong again have halved their smoking rates. So I think one of the main messages I bring is that tobacco control is not a prerogative of North America or Europe by any means. In fact, the very first country to introduce smoke-free areas was Singapore in 1970, 3 years ahead of Norway, that usually is looked at as the first and the gold standard. No, it wasn't. It was Singapore. So I think one of the messages is that the non-sort of high-income countries can actually do tobacco control and do it very successfully and bring some of the rates down. I was asked to talk today about prioritizing it, tobacco control, amongst national goals. And at the end of the day, I found myself actually producing a talk on economics, because the health aspects of tobacco, I think, are very well known. This is going to be the outline of what I will say. So I will look at the health evidence very briefly and look at how the epidemic is increasing. But the truth is that every Ministry of Health in the world knows that tobacco is harmful. The obstacles and the barriers are almost all economic. Governments see the tax coming in. They don't see the massive economic costs of smoking to the country, to business, to the individual. So I will do quite a lot about the cost burden of smoking. And then look at the costs of tobacco control that are actually amazingly small compared with the benefits that they produce. And then look at the very recent development of trying to produce targets and an end game. In other words, having a clear goal in sight, whether it be for prevalence, whether it be for legislation. So first of all, just looking at the health evidence, we've heard from previous speakers that the non-communicable diseases are now extremely dominant in the world. In fact, 60% of all deaths now in the world are from the non-communicable diseases. So these NCDs are no longer in the rich Western countries, they're everywhere, including the really poor countries too. And if you look at this slide, you'll see that tobacco use is the common factor amongst all the heart disease, the stroke, the diabetes, the cancer, the chronic lung disease, and many, many more. That really, the list is absolutely enormous, including even things like cleft palate in babies and so on. But tobacco is really the major cause behind many of these diseases. And what we see, unfortunately, globally, is that this epidemic is growing. Many people in the West particularly think that we're on top of this epidemic. We've got smoke-free areas, we've got high tax, that somehow it's not so much of a problem of priority anymore. And the reality is that nothing could be further from the truth. We're going to have 2 billion more people in the world by 2040. So even if every country brings down its prevalence rates, there will be more smokers in the world by 2040 than there are today. I think it would be almost impossible, looking at the statistics, to say that we will have fewer smokers by 2040. We will not. We'll have more. And people are living longer. So there's an expansion of population and an aging of population. So we will have more smokers. We will have more cigarettes. We will have more consumption. We will have more disease and deaths. We will have much more burden on the health system. We'll have more jobs for farmers and manufacturers. And many countries are concerned about this. So in a sense, the economic argument is reassuring to governments who say, but we employ a lot of farmers. There'll be more tax for governments and certainly more profits from the tobacco industry. The transnational tobacco companies, I have